and 17, 18. 18 students in the Ivy League universities from Cornell University, Imperial College of London, and University College London. These are top universities. Our 18 students has been selected. SRM not only provide the assistance in terms of support in your LOR and all other things, but also we are providing support in terms of financial things. The president scholarship we have, so we are providing the scholarship of 2 lakh to 5 lakh to each student who will secure their master's admission in the Ivy League from QS1 to QS50 ranking. So for that, we are organizing this session to help you, and you will get to know about the many things and how you should start your preparation if you want to admit in the top league of university in the world. You know that IDP is the pioneer in the field of higher studies. They always, through them, many students have secured their places in the top universities in the world. They are doing it since very long, and many students has been placed in the top league universities. So we have collaborated with them. They are our partners. They are partner of SRM University AP. So for that, today we have Mr. Mayank from IDP from Vijayawada branch, Mr. Mayank Srivastav, and Mr. Avinash Das. He is a senior counselor and the head of Guntur branch IDP. He will tell you about that how you should pursue and how you should approach to target the universities, and what is the best way to approach the universities, and they will tell you the key things which you should have mind when you have approaching the top universities and all other things. So I would like to welcome Mr. Mayank and Mr. Avinash. Please welcome, sir, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session. IDP Education has actually tried to do some sessions in the past with SRM University. I think we conducted few sessions which were virtual because most of you were actually at home that time. So, but then yes, we thought we will also conduct few sessions directly, as we would come to know a lot of questions would be there from you, and similarly we would be also helping you to learn a lot of things. So today's session, what we have planned here is more about Australia, because as a destination there are 6 countries for which IDP actually serve for the students. So we do for Australia, US, UK, Canada, Ireland and New Zealand. So these are the countries to which we actually serve. And we are actually partnered with more than 900 universities across in these countries. But always there is a question, like, whether IDP process students, irrespective of whether the university works with us or not, which is absolutely true, because we actually go with the student's profile, and definitely we will be supporting the students irrespective of the university partnered with IDP or not. Good thing is, for Australia, we don't have that challenge at all, because Australia as a destination has got 38 public universities, and fortunately we are partnered with all of them. So we don't have the challenge at all when it comes to Australia to process a student for any university. So in today's session, we will try to cover about basically why someone has to look at Australia as a destination, and what all things have to be in place if you have to process for Australia, and how advanced you have to actually start this process. And definitely there are certain financial requirements and visa requirements involved in the entire process. So we would also try to cover on that part. First and foremost thing, which many are still not aware of, is a lot of time we talk about ranking of the universities while we select the universities.
Okay. Thank you.
Australia as a destination, you would definitely see in the next slide. As a country, as I said, they have 38 public institutions. How many of these are basically world rank institutions? Which we will definitely share in the next one. But probably the prime reason why most of the students opt to study in Australia is because they have world-class universities. Not just world-class, they are world-ranked universities. Second is the value of the qualification that you actually get after completing your studies from Australia. So the qualification that you receive from the university and its value across in various countries. Third, multicultural society. See, definitely there would be a question a lot of times from students. I see two kinds of students when I meet. One, usually they ask, they wanted to study in a university where they also have group of friends coming from the same state, country, region, which some of them try to prefer and study. While some of the students think in an opposite way, they don't want to sit and study with the same group of students. They wanted to meet a new culture and learn new things about other cultures, and that is how they wanted to actually go along. Definitely, if you see, most of the Australian universities will have students in a classroom where at least 15 to 20 country students actually represent in a single classroom. And that is why I said it is actually a multicultural society. Most important, as you all know, the last 2 years of pandemic actually taught a lot about health and safety of the people. If you just check in the history of Google, what was the cases of Australia during the COVID time in the year of 2020 and 21, you would see that they are not even equal to what the state of Andhra Pradesh has. So they very well controlled the entire COVID situation. Predominantly, when a student actually plans to go and study in Australia, there is also overseas student health cover, which you actually pay before you travel from here, which will cover during your entire course duration there, which not only helps in case of any sickness of the student, but it deals with a lot of health related concerns that you actually face if you travel there. Yes, exciting campus life. Now you already have an exciting campus life in SRM. There is no doubt about it. But yes, the infrastructure definitely would be far beyond what you see here. And that is how the universities are, they spend a lot of money on what they actually collect from the students. And being public universities, as you know, the funding what they receive, they try to spend a lot of it on the student development, right? Innovative and abundant research opportunities. Yes, this is one primary thing which many of the students doesn't actually know at all. Australia has an opportunity of giving PhD to the students, wherein if you get a PhD opportunity from any university of Australia, you will see that it is completely funded. So your entire PhD will be a fully funded one if you get one such opportunity from any of the Australian universities, provided you also may get a stipend additionally for your living expenditure. And Australia is the only country where you find this opportunity. Part-time and post-study work opportunities. We will try to cover about post-study work opportunities in the later part. But yes, definitely I have to mention about how part-times actually work out in Australia, because till January 2022, the part-time job opportunities in Australia were 20 hours per week for a student, which is actually official. And when I say it is official, it means a person in Melbourne actually has to be paid at least $19.5 per hour as a minimum wage during the part-time. And if you just try to calculate this, you will find that only during the part-time that you actually do in Australia, for the 2 years of course duration that you go and study, you will be earning nothing less than 40 to 45,000 Australian dollars. This was before Jan 2022. But now, Australia has made it a complete work rights for a student for unlimited hours. even during the study, which means now if you go as a student and you start working part-time, you can work for unlimited hours, which is actually official and it is paid through the banks. And what is the benefit someone gets if it is paid through the banks? Yes, of course. Once you complete masters and if someone really need a financial support, then you would be eligible for it as a student, definitely, because you are earning in that country and you are paying your taxes, right? Focus on international students and the quality outcomes. This is something I think, we are trying to organize some sessions with our universities also. But then you will come to know that Australian universities work in collaboration with the industries. So any such program what they develop and they teach in their campus, it is always integrated with some of the companies there, where the student would actually go and also do some internships during the course study. Now this will help you and also the company in two ways. For you, the benefit is you are actually getting acquainted with the business process of that particular industry and that particular company, which means once you pass out of your education, finding a job in the relevant industry or from the same organization would be much easier because you need not be trained again. Company will consider that as a benefit because they need not hire someone and spend money and wait for them to actually get trained and perform. So you're a ready resource for an organization once you complete your study there, and that is how you are benefited, and equally the industry is also benefited. And for this, how the universities work is they collaborate and try to develop the skill set of the student, right? So let us move to the next one. Is what is the quality of education? How Australia is actually assuring this for the students? Even if you check with some of the other countries which are very prominent and where students go, you cannot compare that with Australia because the courses of Australia basically are registered courses, where if you see the course is actually registered, it means it is also checked by the government and the Education of Australia department regarding the outcomes of it. Parallelly, universities have to deliver the course as per the promise what they have actually made. So all of a sudden, a university cannot stop providing a course, or in case any such incident happens, the money paid by the student to that particular university is always safe because either it would be transferred to other university where student wanted to study, or it would be given back to the students. And for that, the Education of Australia has framed an act separately, which is the ESOS Act of 2000, which primarily is to protect the interest of the student and the money of the student. You can see, all of a sudden you will hear some university in some country has got some issue, and then you will see all the students must be studying 1 or 2 years there, who will be even about to come out from the classes, and all of a sudden overnight the visa status of the student will go for a toss, right? Even we have heard one such situation recently in Canada for Quebec region, where 3 colleges have suddenly turned down their boards, and that really impacted around 2,000 students in that particular 3 colleges. But which is completely different in Australia is because the government is also a stakeholder and a person who is going to take the responsibility for the students' education. So as I said, why Australian universities in the beginning? The 38 globally recognized universities. Scholarships, after pandemic, there are universities who are also giving close to 50% scholarships in Australia. Definitely there are different types of scholarships, but the primary scholarship what students get is a merit-based scholarship. Merit-based scholarship is nothing but something related to your academic percentage. So obviously based on your academic percentage and from which section of the university you actually come out from. So Australia has divided Indian universities into 3 sections. So a student from section 1 university would actually require a lesser percentage compared to students from section 2 and 3. Definitely this would be updated on a regular basis, and you can always check with us I believe SRM AP is already there in section 1 because as per the recent guidelines what we have received, so you're already coming from a section 1 university in India. Definitely art of facilities, rankings and all other things. But above all, if someone has to plan and study, you always have to look at the intakes. And based on intakes, you have to start planning all your other arrangements. So what intakes Australia has got is Feb, July and November. So what is the primary intake in this? Definitely July is actually a primary intake and Feb equally is a primary intake. And November is an intake where we see at least more than 50% of the universities offer the programs. But if someone has to plan and study for Australia, then definitely you have to look at July as your major intake to plan and go. Yeah. So in the first slide itself, we were actually talking about few universities and rankings. Before beginning this session, I think your placement team was also helping us with the same information. Based on the QS rankings, I think you have some facility here also regarding scholarship. So you can see how many universities of Australia basically are in the top 100 of the world as per QS or the Times rankings. Basically, we have a university group in Australia, which is Group 8, which are the top institutions in Australia. And in the top 8 institutions, 7 of them are already there in the top 100 universities of the world. And even if you go back and check rankings for 2020 or 90, you will find this information to be improving on year-by-year basis. So despite of COVID, the rankings of 2021 still say that 7 universities of Australia have progressed and are there in the top 100 list of the world. So how usually the study happens? So how do the classes actually happen in Australia? Basically, the classroom teaching. It is not a simple classroom teaching where we come and attend a class. It is a mixture of classroom teaching along with the tutorials. Professors and people from the industries would actually start teaching the classes, and students would be more actively participating on the assignments. And that is how your overall classroom teaching will actually progress in the 2 years of time. So it is a mixture of not just classroom teaching, but you will also experience people from the industries coming and teaching you on various factors. And definitely the facilities of infrastructure, what you come across will be always a complete advanced one. Yeah. So as I said, the merit-based scholarship is one prominent scholarship, which is basically based on your academic percentage. Yes, there are certain course-specific scholarships also available. That depends on the courses what we choose. Third are the bursaries that usually you get from the universities, as they usually have some additional funding for the students. So there are 3 different types of getting a scholarship from the universities. Above all, there are certain Australian scholarships which were started during the pandemic as an international scholarship, for which you have to apply, and there would be a specific deadline for this. So apart from your merit-based scholarship, you will also be eligible to apply for this additional scholarships, and you have to place such applications well before the deadlines. So if someone is going for July intake, ideally such scholarships would be applied by Feb itself. Yeah, this is just for some reference to give you some basic glimpse of how universities differ with respect to their requirements and how they usually offer the scholarship to the students. And it keeps changing on a regular basis, intake to intake, because it depends on the overall funding that university actually has with them. So that is how they plan and offer scholarship to the students. But as I said, there are 38 universities, but what you're seeing on the screen is just few of them, because I just wanted to give some glimpse of the scholarship opportunities so that you would get an idea. So post-study work rights, which we actually discussed in the first stage itself. This is something which is a little bit more exciting about Australia. Reason because now Australia is divided into 3 different regions. So how these regions are divided is basically Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. The 3 cities, if you are someone studying in any of the universities located in this particular cities, your post-study work rights were actually 2 years for study and 2 years additional to find a job, which now primarily is going to be changed as 3 years, which is going to be 2 plus 3. Now, there are regional locations in Australia. Definitely this list is actually bigger. So places, the entire South Australia as a state itself is a regional location. And definitely there are other regional locations across in many locations. So if you study in any of these universities, which are located here, then you get a post-study work right of 2 plus 3 years. Now, which is primarily going to change to 2 plus 4. Now, there is one more region, which is sub-regional locations in Australia. Now, this has certain universities where your study and post-study is going to be 2 plus 4 years. And primarily that is also going to change to 2 plus 5. Now, if you ask, the highest visa tenure given to a student for any country is actually 2 plus 3, max. For US, you get 5 years of visa, 2 years of study, and 3 years of OPT. For UK, you get 2 years of post-study, even if you study a 1 or 2 years program in UK. Canada, yes, if you study a 1 year program, you would only get 1 year. But if you study a 2 year program, you are eligible to get close to 3 years of post-study opportunity. But if you see, Australia is far beyond all this, where you have an opportunity of getting a post-study work right till 4 years, or which will change now also into 5 years. Now, what is the benefit? It is the decision of Australian government to expand their territory across to various places and develop them. So they are actually giving incentives to the industries and the universities to set up their campuses in these regional and sub-regional locations. So you may think that, what would be my job opportunities if I actually study in such locations? Definitely locating a campus or creating a campus in sub-regional or regional locations could be a task for the university. But then if it is not progressing, obviously the loss is not just going to be the university or the campus, but as a country overall also. The education system and the quality is something that will reach into the global market and ultimately affect the country also for Australia. So that is where industry is actually also going to set up their location outside the regional locations and sub-regional locations today. So the money what they are investing there is primarily to make sure the population is spreading across. If not, the entire population of Australia itself is 2.5 crore, which is not even half of what Andhra Pradesh is. So that is how they are actually progressing. And if you ask economically how this country is trending, maybe you can also go and check some of the websites where you will see what is the dollar value of Australia for the last 10 years of time. You will primarily see this close to 50 rupees and above always. Let it be COVID or let it be any other financial crisis that we would have come across in the last 1 decade. There are countries where the dollar rate keeps steadily increasing or steeply again declining. But for Australia, despite of COVID, the dollar value has not changed much, which means the country has the financial stability to handle the things and any crisis that they actually face. And once you go and spend some money there, definitely you will also have to look at the return of your investment that you are making on your studies. And definitely what you make here is something that you're going to get back by looking at the financial stability of the country itself. Yeah, this is something which we already covered. Working for unlimited hours during your study now, which was a recent update from Jan 22. So I'm sure if someone is working and studying now in Australia, they would definitely be reaching something, between $50,000 to $60,000 is what they'll definitely get back during the study. I'm not talking about after study. After study, you will definitely find a job and get the money, but something that you actually get during your study will help you to definitely handle your finances. So, what are the education costs involved in this overall process? Definitely it depends on the university that you select and the program that you select. But the ranging of the fee structure is something that you also have to know. So the average tuition fees that you see is around 22,000 Australian dollars to 40,000 Australian dollars in a year. And living expenditure is something which is standard across in all the Australian locations. So the living expenditure that you have to show for your visa for Australia is $21,041, which is actually a common one for any university, any location of Australia. And this is something that you have to show for your visa funding. And how you have to show it, how you can actually manage it, is something that we would be helping you at the stage of your application process, because finances is something that is completely going to change from every individual person. It cannot be same for everyone, right? So if you wanted to have a clear discussion on that, you can always have a discussion with our counselors who will guide you in this process. So the most important process or the factor in this entire Australian education process is when to start and how the stages would be. The first and foremost thing, not just for Australia, I'm actually giving this as a complete advice for any country that you actually plan. A lot of times we see that students come to us and they already have some test scores with them, and they start looking at universities based on their score and their academic profile, which is actually the not scenario to work out, because you always have to start working on selecting the universities and the programs well before you actually take your test and plan the rest of things, because you will first come to know what are the universities that are actually offering this course and which university in this would meet your criteria. And once you get this information in hand, you can always try and meet the requirements of the universities. So if you are doing this process well before even writing tests like GRE, Ielts or TOEFL, you will have a lot of information on the universities and how you can actually plan and get to it. But most of the times it happens in the opposite way, where students take GRE tests or Ielts and then come down and start discussing upon universities and the programs. But if you are someone who is seriously planning for any abroad education, then the process has to start from selecting the program what you wanted to first study. And if you can do that, it will help you to know a lot of information about the universities and the programs. And as I said, the opportunities related to scholarship and other things, you will also get to know about this information well first in hand, right? And if you do that and then start submitting application to the institutions after this, the tenure that you usually take for most of the Australian universities to give you an offer letter, it starts from 1 day to almost 1 month. Group 8 universities, which I actually showed in the beginning, such institutions may take close to 3 to 4 weeks to tell you about the admit decision once you apply. But there are universities in Australia who will also tell you admission decision just in a span of 1 or 2 days. And that is how they are very quick in processing. The least time maybe probably, which I took in my experience with IDP, for a student to apply, get an admission, and then also file his visa is just 1 week. So a student has come, selected an university and we applied. And then once he got his offer, he accepted his admission and then lodged his visa. And all this process just took 1 week. So it depends on how you actually plan and do it. So once you apply and you submit all your documentation, the next stage will be you either get a conditional offer letter or an unconditional offer letter based on the documentation what you submitted. But for Australia, the primary condition always is meeting your English language requirement, because we actually come from a non-English speaking country. So we need to write tests like Ielts or PTE primarily for Australia, so that you would meet the English language requirement of the country and the universities. Second is the financial conditions. Definitely financial conditions depends on the university that you select in Australia. So based on the universities, some universities would ask you to submit your financials before paying your fees, where the university has to approve your finances and then you have to pay the fees. But through IDP, we have that privilege of more than 30 universities in this 38 don't ask IDP students to actually show the funding. So who's responsible for this funding? Obviously is IDP. So your counselor will actually guide you in this process, and they would be the person responsible to submit any relevant documentation related to this if the university asks. If not, as we have the privilege through IDP not to submit it, so you can always go ahead and accept your offer and start looking at gathering the other documentation for the visa process. Right? So the stage is selection of the course and university, submitting an application with all relevant documentation. And luckily, Australia's document process is very, very easy and simple compared to other countries. They just need your academic documents and your passport and any English language score. Maybe you can say, I have not taken any English language test, so I would be taking it in future. So can I still submit an application? Yes, you have that opportunity to still place an application, and you will get a conditional offer in that case, where the condition would be mentioned that you need to submit your English score. Next is arranging your finances and accepting your offer. Before COVID, we used to have this opportunity of getting the medicals done for a student for Australia before the visa allotment. But now it is going to be after that visa allotment that you go and get your medicals done. Through a recognized agency, we have 2 such recognized agencies in Hyderabad, where you have to take an appointment and get the medicals done. And it is interlinked with the portal of immigration, which will be directly sent to the immigration department only. And lodging a visa, definitely you will have certain checklists to this, which we will be sharing when you attend for a complete counseling with us. And once we lodge the visa, we will be trying to submit all the documentation that you actually provide to us to make sure that the visa is coming as early as possible. Funding requirement, yes, this is basically the most important stage. There would be a lot of questions on this, but I would just share what is the base minimum that you need to have ready. Australia Department of Home Affairs usually look at 1 year of tuition fees and 1 year of living expenditure for a student when they actually lodge the visa. So they check whether this funding is available or not. In this, most of the time you pay the first semester fees before lodging visa. So when you plan for your visa finances, you just have to show the second semester fees and living expenditure. Living expenditure, as I said, is common across for all Australian universities, which is the same 21,041. And the rest depends on the course structure, what you actually have. Second important thing, what are the acceptable fundings? There are multiple options that you have in this category. That is why I said finances for Australia are going to be different for different students, because it depends on how you plan and then discuss with your parents about this. But certainly, if you have to start planning for the finances, then you should be well in advance, because savings account balance for Australia is something that has to be at least 2.5 to 3 months old if you have that savings coming from a source which is actually not having a document. But if you have any document and money is coming from a source with a proper supporting document, then that is always acceptable. But above all, educational loan is something that will always help you to manage the funding more easily compared to any other funding options. But in detail, if you would like to know about the funding, then please have a discussion with your family and also have a discussion with the counselor who will actually try to relate the information and then guide you further. But apart from these two things, ITR is something that is more required and important for Australia when we lodge the visa. And the family income through this ITR should be at least 7 lakhs from your family. So if your parents were actually not filing the ITRs, and if you're actually looking at Australian education, then the first thing that you actually have to discuss and do is to make sure that they are filing their IT returns. And the overall income that they have to have on paper should be minimum of 7 lakhs. It can be from a single parent or both the parents together, but then it should be above 7 is what you have to prepare, right? And ITRs cannot be done on a regular basis. So you cannot go back and file your IT return for 2020 anymore now. So you can only do it for 2021. So that is where the actual challenge is. So if you are planning for this, then definitely please have a discussion with your parents and then see how you can manage this. If you have any other family members who wanted to support, because if you see the family tree will always be your own family, your parents and your siblings. Next comes your grandparents on both your mother and father side who can also support. But beyond this, if your paternal and maternal uncle or aunt wanted to also support you, they can still do it to a certain extent of minimum 30% in the overall funding that you actually require. So this would be a very deep discussion, probably, which will change from student to student. So I don't want it to maybe prolong and create any confusion on that. But primarily, you have to discuss about your ITRs and the finances with the parents well in advance, because it cannot be like US or other countries. Because for US, if you wanted to go for a visa, maybe you will deposit some money 1 week before going for a visa interview and still you can manage it. But that actually does not work out in this case. Even for Canada, there is nothing related to finance that you have to show. There you already will pay your entire fees. So nothing much has to be done there. Canada will collect your 1 year fees from you already, and the 1 year living expenditure also has to be deposited. So 15 to 16 lakhs will be already paid from your pocket well before lodging visa for Canada. Similarly, the situation of UK is something which is relevant to Australia, where ITR just is an exemption, but showing the funding in the bank account is also a very common process for UK as well, right? ITR is just going to be an exemption in Canada and UK process. But when it comes to US or Australia, you definitely need to have them ready with you. Yeah, so yeah. So we have a small update with respect to Ielts also here. We actually have come into an understanding and agreement with the University of SRM already for this. So IDP actually is the owner of IELTS test across India now. And across the globe, we are also the co-owner of IELTS test. So being the owner of the exam, we actually collaborated with the university and we have a login already available with the institution itself here. So if you wanted to book your IELTS slot, then probably you can always meet your international relations team who will actually help you in booking the slot. What is different by booking the slot from here on from the website? It is definitely going to be different because the slots that you see in your IELTS website, that actually gets closed on a regular basis because we actually give some set of seats through website and few through our channel partners like this. So maybe sometimes the date might be closed on IDP website, but it would still be open for the channel partners to do the bookings. So if you are planning to take the test, then you can always reach out to the team and they'll be helping you in the process. And what you need to book an IELTS slot is your passport. So you need to have your passport in hand to book the slot and take the test. That is the only identification document that we actually accept for booking the slot, right? So as a non-English speaking country, obviously student has to take certain tests, and IELTS is one primary test which is acceptable for all the countries. So the modules that you see here and that you are supposed to write and score will determine on 4 factors. And these 4 factors are the common factors for any English test. Not only IELTS, let it be PTE, TOEFL or Duolingo. The parameters on what the test you is always the same. The way they conduct the test and the way they have their scoring pattern is actually different. But when it comes to the modules that they cover and try to check your language ability is going to be the same. So what is the success mantra for this? Definitely not going for a coaching center, because IELTS never actually asked the student about their grammar or any other things, right? We were only looking at the ability of someone to use the language. So that is how we are having the 4 parameters here. And not only IELTS, anyone actually has the same. If you ask me, if you compare other tests, how maybe IELTS would be more easy or convenient for the student, we all are basically use British English. We are used to it right from the schooling. So obviously, IELTS is a test which is primarily a British English based test. But if you see TOEFL, obviously it is American English based. So taking the test would be more convenient in the language that you actually speak, right? And there are certain times where students come up and ask, IELTS is actually not giving me score in one of the module, or maybe my friend got better scores and all, which generally doesn't happen, because though we actually are the owners for this test, we have our own team and complete compliance in place. So we never know what exactly the question paper is going to be on the day of the test till someone opens the question paper. And how we actually evaluate the test, we have again a complete set of people, and they never know whose paper they were even correcting. So once you submit your result or your answer sheet, we page break that and we give your entire answer sheet to different people by doing the page breaking, and we remove the name of the students also in that answer sheets, and then someone will actually evaluate your answers. And that is how the scoring pattern of IELTS is actually going to be very complaint based and also genuine, right? So apart from IELTS, if you see the other tests also, for Australia, primarily even TOEFL is one of the acceptable tests, but not a TOEFL home-based version, because after pandemic, most of the tests started becoming home-based also. You have TOEFL home-based, you have PTE home-based, but then these are not acceptable for the visa. So you need to write a proper test center-based TOEFL examination, and that is how it is acceptable for the visa. And if you see, just the pattern of the test change, but then if you see the modules, it is well and the same. Yeah, the third acceptable test for Australia as a country is PTE, and the scoring pattern for this is again going to be different. This is completely a computer-based test. Even TOEFL is a computer-based test, but Ielts have two patterns, paper-based and computer-based. And how the scoring usually comes? For Ielts, once you attempt a computer-based test, we take 5 days to evaluate and give the score. But if you write paper-based test, we take 13 days to evaluate and give score. TOEFL again will almost take the same time to evaluate and give the score, whereas PTE usually comes in a span of 2 to 3 days. So if you give the test of PTE, your score would actually come down just in 2 to 3 days of time. We can go back to IDP after this. Yeah, so how IDP actually is different from all the other agents? The first thing, IDP does not charge any single rupee from a student for any process that we actually do. For countries, Australia, Canada, UK, Ireland, and New Zealand. So the entire process that we do for the students here is free of cost. And if there is any university who is asking to pay an application fees, we will be giving that to the student as an option to pay, provided we don't charge any money. None of the counselors in IDP would be asking you to pay any money directly to them. If you are paying something, it would be paid only to an university or an embassy, not to anyone else. So being a co-owner of Ielts across the globe, and that is how we are actually running this organization. So as I said, we don't mind to send a student irrespective of the university partnered with IDP or not. So far, if you ask what is the experience of IDP in this industry, yes, we are someone who started in 1969. So we completed almost our 52 years in this industry now. And we are spread across in 30 countries with more than 100 offices. And we keep expanding. Only in India, now we are with 44 physical offices. And we also have our omni-channel offices, which are now serving students in the locations which we don't have a physical office. And definitely, how counselors in IDP are different from others. We have a certain certification test for the people who work in this industry. And then our counselors are someone who take the test and get certified within their first 2 months of time once they join IDP. So that is how they are more qualified and how they will be having the latest updates with them irrespective of any other agents. So
we are now open for the questions.
We are now open for the questions. If
Students, if anyone of you have any question, you can ask.
Thank you so much for your in-detailed presentation. On behalf of students, I do have a couple of questions. One question is that, how safe is Australia compared to other countries for Indians?
good, you asked that. Thank you. I think I missed this point when we were actually talking about how the quality of education and the financial and economical status of country was. Most probably, if you just maybe turn down and check any of the latest news for the last few years of Australia, you will not see any kind of incident. You will not find any incident related to the students' safety in that particular country. Because so maybe someone can hide an information at campus level or something, but as a destination overall Australia, you know that the media is available there. There is social media which is already in place. So if there are any such issues related to the crime or racism that most of the people try to talk about Australia, which is definitely not the scenario. And I don't hear any such incidents reported in the last few years from Australia itself. Right? So definitely the culture of Australia, something which you would see from the people, more friendly than other countries. So racism is just something which people try to talk, but then on paper, today in the news, you would never see it happen in the last few years of time from any of the Australian universities or the students.
One more is that if students are planning for their PR, what are the chances of getting PR and what is the probability of securing there?
Okay. See, in the beginning, I think we had a slide. We were actually talking about the quality assurance of the Australian universities, where the government is also a stakeholder. So what Australian universities and the government does, based on the program's outcome and the employability, they try to continue the programs. And if they see that one particular program where the students are studying and coming out, but then they don't find the jobs in the job market, if such scenario arises, then the universities would be asked to discontinue such courses on their campuses. Because employability is something which is related to the Australia as a country also. So they don't want it to continue such courses on the campus, and they regularly monitor this. The average employability rate for the students who come out from most of the Australian universities is close to 85%. And I think we already started planning some universities to come down here, but I'll just give a glimpse of how Australian universities actually work. If a student starts MS degree in the university, they usually have a career center there where they start picking down the skill set of the student once they progress on every semester basis. So once a student completes a semester, they would have a certain skill set updated on their resumes, and that is how they do semester based. And by the time you finish your 4 semesters, your resume will always be linked with the industry based skill set that you gained from this course. So you don't go to an interview just based on showing your education qualification, but you always represent the skill set, because today the job market is something where people are looking at skill set. They are not looking at just a qualification of a person from the institution, right? So that is how the overall career planning happens in the campuses of the Australian universities, which will help the students to prepare their own skill set based resumes and attend these interviews. But as I said, parallelly, you always work with industries, right? So maybe I'll just give a small example, which will also link to this. There is, Western Australia, which is primarily a state related to mining. But if you ask, I'm going to Western Australia, I'm going to study a course there related to, management, tourism management, or something related to business management, will it work out to me? When you wanted to start a mining company, obviously you have to first start looking at a location. Now, once you finalize the location, the next thing that you have to start doing there is build up an infrastructure for people to come down and then to start the work, right? So the employment starts from the stage of building the infrastructure, where people from various industries have to come and work. By the time the infrastructure is built, definitely you'll have people from the next segment who actually will come and work there, right? So the progress of one industry is not just going to start and work only for mining. It starts from building infrastructure from a civil, then to the hotels and the management, and then definitely the food, and that is how technology comes, and further the people also will grow. So this is how the overall scenario of development in Australia actually works, right? So your career placement opportunities from the campuses, which is indirectly leading you to a PR, because how PR actually works, I'll just make it very simple. So I went and studied a master's degree from one of the Australian universities, and I just came out, right? Now, based on what I studied, the next thing I'm supposed to do is find a relevant job to the study what I did. So, and if I find such job, then my experience, my education, my age, my IELTS scores, the place what I study, all this will have certain points, and all these points are something that will be calculated. And Australia always has a occupation list which is going to update on a regular basis. So the job that you are actually having, or the one you are going to do, if it is there in the occupation list of Australia, then you are eligible to apply for a PR. So PR is always related to what you study and how you find a job in that. And your university is someone who will always guide you in doing this, right? So yes, there are certain scenarios where we heard people saying getting PR in Australia is actually tough, but that is not the real case here, because in past, the people who traveled Australia in 2016 to 18, there were a lot of leverages that time for Australian process. But now that is not the scenario. You cannot change the university and program that you select and go. But people used to do it in the past because they have that option. So what people used to do is, they used to take an admission from university here, go there, and they discontinue that and join into some college. And they do some diploma programs, which they don't share in reality with the people who are away from Australia. So that is where PR was actually a concern for such profiles. But now, if you see the occupation-based skill set, you will always see that the jobs are something that you are, seeing today in the market, and you are studying a program related to that. That is where I started from. Always start your university selection and program selection. That will give you a lot of scope to do research, right?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
From here.
Yes,
Yeah.
Malik.
So I can ask a question that from the beginning we had discussed about the public universities in Australia, right? So is there any kind of private universities in Australia? And the next thing is, being in the current situation and the generation, we think of to study in different kind of universities, like in SRM University, we are having semester abroad programs. We will go to different countries while studying in the SRM and complete our semesters from different universities. So is there any kind of thing that Australian universities provide for us?
Yeah, certainly a new question which I faced across. There are private universities in Australia, but not much. There are just 4 of them which are there. Maybe one of the university which is also there from US have a campus. Carnegie Mellon University have their campus in Australia also. So public and private universities, that is definitely not a different question in Australian education system, because the kind of study abroad programs that you asked, which you have from SRM here, you would definitely have with Australian public universities as well. Now, you may be thinking how public universities in Australia would be when you compare with private, right? Ranking of the universities which I showed in the PPT, QS rankings, if you see. QS rankings basically are based on the academic outcomes, employability, funding someone spends on the research, and how the infrastructure of the university is actually, and the research. Considering these factors, that is how the rankings will be given to the universities. So in Australia, if you see the public universities, what you speak about, they are not comparable with the public universities of US or other countries, right? And that is why they are there in the top 100 list in the globe through various rankings that you are seeing. Let it be QS, let it be Times, whoever is actually doing this ranking, still they are actually finding these universities in that list, because you will see a lot of students from the Australian universities who get PhD opportunities, who do research, who travel to other universities also for various research projects. And that is where they are actually helping these universities to stand in the top list, right? Infrastructure wise, yeah, maybe I can just give you some example, because I've been to Melbourne and been to a few universities there. So the infrastructure, what you see is definitely far, far beyond what you actually see in some of the top institutions in India itself, right? And why most of them are public? It is because the government and Department of Education is managing that education system and taking that responsibility. That is why they are public. And it helps them to fund a lot of money, because the federal government has a lot of funding which they actually provide to the universities. And that is why they wanted to be a public university always.
There is a kind of thing that PT is dominant in Australia, right? So how will tackle that? I mean, IELTS versus PT. And
We don't have any such concerns of going against. We don't have any such concerns of going against PTE or anything. IELTS is basically acceptable across the globe, and around 5 million people take this test every year. So we are not basically conducting IELTS because we have some competition in this market. IELTS itself is a test which was recognized long back, right? PTE is something which came just 10 years back, and we don't have any competition related concerns in this at all. Primarily, if you wanted to go for an immigration, because IELTS is actually two types. One is general and other one is academic, right? As student, you actually write academic. But if you are someone who wanted to apply for a PR from any country across globe to Canada or Australia, then definitely IELTS is the basic test. PTE also has been one of the tests in the recent years which was acceptable for Australia alone for the PR part. So it is just related to the PR process. So student can take any of this tests, right? But if you write IELTS today and get 6.5, tomorrow if you need to get 7 in IELTS for a PR, I don't think it is a big task, right? Because you will get accustomed to the culture, language, and you would be more often speaking English. So getting a 7 score tomorrow is not going to be a big task for any student. But as I said, this problem was primarily there because 2016 to 18, the people who traveled, that is where there was leverages given to the students. There are universities who are accepting even 6 IELTS. And of course, we still have such institutions now also, where you have overall 6, no less than 6 acceptable. So if you are looking at such institution, maybe you wanted to again write IELTS tomorrow, then maybe getting 7 would be, not an easy task. But see, PR is not related to IELTS at all, or PT. Okay. PR is basically about your profession. Okay. So whatever you study here, and as I said, there are 3 locations in Australia: cities, regional locations, and sub-regional locations. If you study in regional and sub-regional locations, you get additional 5 points since you are studying there, right? So PR is basically about the total points. So your education, your age, your study program, all this will have certain points and you have to count that. So why IELTS or PT come into picture is, when someone don't have that points required based on the profession that you apply. If you are someone from CS background and you study computer science related program and you wanted to apply for PR, points that you require, and someone who comes from an economics or accounting background, that person wanted to study professional accounting and apply for a PR. So the points that you both need would not be the same. Okay. professional courses require more points than the engineering courses. So when people don't have that points, the next solution is to take IELTS or PTE and then make sure that you get the scores so that your overall points will be helpful to get you that PR once you drop that PR. So that is how PR is connected with tests like English of IELTS or PTE, but it has nothing to do with what test student wanted to actually write. As I said, primarily it depends on how you are comfortable in writing the test. Because if you are someone comfortable using pen and paper, then you can always write IELTS. If you are comfortable using a computer-based test and write, then you have both the options, right? But as an exam also, there would be certain differences here because IELTS is not an integrated test. We go module by module, right? PTE and TOEFL are integrated tests. So while you do your speaking, it also catches your other skills also in the test and give you the scores, right? So writing the test is going to be your choice, how you are comfortable in writing that and how you actually plan it, right? Because PTE is available every day, TOEFL is available every day. So even if you wanted to write next week, you can easily write, right? When it comes to IELTS, that is not the scenario. We just conduct it 3 to 4 times in a month, right? So you have to plan it well in advance, almost like 1 month before the test, you have to book the slot. So that is the reason why we collaborated also and gave a separate channel opportunity here so that you still can book the slots to take the test if you don't find them through our websites.
There is obvious confusion between the British Council and IDP one, right? British Council is also offering the IELTS test and IDP is also offering the IELTS test. So
now there is
what
a
may
British
be the
Council now.
difference between the IDP and the British Council one? I mean, any credibility between those or?
Just sharing you the update. British Council is no more conducting IELTS in India. Only IDP is the owner of IELTS exam in India now. So we are the only person conducting IELTS tests from July 2021. So we already acquired that business last year itself. So there is no more British Council or no more confusion. There's only IELTS IDP that you have in India to write, provided even before with British Council or IDP, the question paper is always the same because the person preparing the question paper was Cambridge University, who prepares the question paper 6 months before the calendar start date. So if I have to conduct a test in Jan 2022, then my question paper is prepared by Cambridge in July 2021, and that is how the test actually runs. So it was always the same paper and same thing. There was, in 2012, there used to be a British Council manager who used to visit me on a frequent basis and say, people were writing more IDP, so you tell me how to go and promote British Council, back there. So I said, why don't you go and visit the, colleges and universities and educate students about it? So they started doing that from 2012, and that is how people started writing it. After a few years of time, then it changed. Then people started saying it in opposite way, that you don't get score if you write through IDP, you write through British Council. It is vice and versa. It is only the person's ability and the performance that they do on the day of the test. IELTS, it is something that you perform on day of test because it is more about time management and your language ability, right? There is nothing related to quant, any analytical skills required for you to perform. So it is just something that was there in the market. But yes, we already acquired it in July 21. It's been already close to 9 months now. So now there is no such confusion required anymore.
Thank you so much, sir, for addressing that.
So if you are having more queries, we have office in Vijayawada, that is at near NTR Circle, and we have office in Guntur as well at Lakshmipuram. Right? So Avinash represent Guntur branch. So if you have any question, you can reach out to Guntur office as well. Any other questions?
Sir, actually now the students are deaf now. They're having an exam at 1
Okay,
o'clock later. And a few queries they have. I
Okay.
just want to
All right.
for that text for. That's what they came. For
No problem.
Now they don't have time to.
You can send us
interact
like
and
you
know.
can send us a page.
Yes.
We will revert on that.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Let me take this opportunity to ask question on behalf of a student, whatever they have said. So, is there any provision or trend that you have observed that if students are applying early, then they have better chance for the selection with the scholarship and other thing in Australian universities?
Early bird also is there.
Definitely you have such an opportunities because, as I said, scholarships are different types. Merit-based scholarship is something that comes based on the academic percentage. But certain universities give early bird scholarship, which is again going to be additional 5% than what they were already offered through merit. That is one such scholarship that is there. Second, there are certain scholarships exclusively for students from India, where Australia destination scholarships that we actually call them. These scholarships have specific deadlines. So above the regular scholarship, student always can apply to this Australian destination scholarships, which will also be given to the student apart from what they usually get. So if someone is planning to go for July intake, and if someone is starting this process maybe 6 months before, then obviously they have this advantages of applying to these additional scholarships. Provided there is a situation where we had a student who completed only his bachelor's, but still, due to the projects that the student has done, he was still given an opportunity for research from the university. Usually, research opportunity is given for someone who complete their master's, and then they get that advantage. But there are certain situations in Australian system where student credentials will also help student to get a research opportunity while they complete bachelor's and go from here. So these are advantages which student can get if they start this process and doing this research well in advance. So if someone wanted to go in July, someone who start doing this research from November and December, they will certainly have some advantages over other students.
Sometimes students may have backlogs at the time of application when they are in like 4th year or when they are applying. So are they still eligible to apply for the Australian university with the backlogs?
Yes.
Applying with backlogs is acceptable, but for a student to accept that offer and proceed for a payment towards getting a confirmation of enrollment letter from the university, that is where university usually hold that document, and they advise student not to make the fee payment to the universities if there is an active backlog still at the stage of 4.2. But we also have provisional confirmation of enrollment provision also through the universities of Australia, where student have completed his 4.1 and he is pursuing 4.2. He doesn't have any backlogs. He is holding an offer and he wanted to accept it. We will get provisional COE from the university still in such case, which means they look at the percentage of student, and if they see there is no backlogs, they'll say to accept the offer and make a fee payment, and we will also lodge your visa based on that. What student has to do in this scenario is, usually the courses start in July, end of July. So by the time they travel to the university, they have to get their completion related document from India and then make sure that they are providing that to the university by the time they enroll there. So most of the time, we never had this challenge because July looks very, very near because for US, the intake is August. For Canada and UK, it is September. So people still have a lot of time. But for Australia, students always have this confusion whether they can go for July or not. But 100% it is possible because you will be completing their semester exams mostly in April or May, unless we had the COVID situation. That is how academic calendar was being across in all the universities in India. But still, even now, if someone is going to pass out in June, they can still plan their education in July intake, because you will have opportunity to go and submit your 42 and PCCMM in July when you enroll.
Is there any policy like many Indian universities have that international students have to live inside the campus only? So like some policies there, or the students are free to live outside the campus also in Australia?
No, student can live anywhere. Living within the campus, certainly it is also an advantage to student in certain cases, but university does not have such restrictions. The difference is the accommodation and other charges that someone has to pay living in university-based accommodations will almost be similar to what someone will spend outside the campus also, because that is how they were actually affordable. University accommodations are not again something that stay in the university. That is one more thing. They will always be in the cities also. So though it is an accommodation that is being offered by the universities, that doesn't stay in the campus. So it is always there in the city and different places. So students have the provision of staying there. And usually the bookings will be on weekly basis. So you can start booking an accommodation for weekdays also. Before you go and find a permanent accommodation, you can always book an accommodation from India. IDP also has that association with the accommodation centers by the universities in the Australian territory. So we have that opportunity to get a booking for a student towards accommodation, even for weeks before they go from here, and find a permanent accommodation there within the campus or outside the campus along with friends. And most of these are very affordable because they are paid on a weekly basis. So the student doesn't have to worry on that part at all. And as I said, even the part-time money that they get is something which is official on paper, which means even if a student finds an accommodation, then people would always be ready to give them an apartment or a house for staying with proper agreement and all that things.
If a student plans for his PhD program, be it in management or in sciences, how it's going to be? It will be fully funded PhD program, or they need to plan for it, or there will be special scholarship for it?
Australia, the funding that they usually get for PhD is always 100%. So student has to not worry about it. The only thing is either they get a fully funded scholarship based program, or they get funding plus also stipend for living. But there will be no paid PhDs actually offered by the institutions. So if student is getting a PhD opportunity, then he is getting it fully funded. He is always on a safer side financially.
And he's eligible for working with
Yes.
partner.
Yes, he is always eligible to work. So research scholar is also eligible to work.
I think on this note, we can end up this session. Thank you, Mr. Avinash, for this insightful session. It was really wonderful to have you. And you have covered all the areas from application process, scholarship, visa, and other things. And I would like to thank, on behalf of SRM University, I would like to thank Mr. Mayank, Mr. Avinash, ma'am, sir, for your time. It was really wonderful to have you here. And in the future, we are expecting many more sessions from you, and those will be helpful for the students. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for arranging this session. We will try to support as much possible from our end always to the students. So please do reach out to us in case of any